So, kind of piggybacking off of what we have kind of already been talking about, and we've been talking about this ad nauseum for quite a while now. The question has been circulating over and over and over and over again. And that question is, oh man, why do things just never work the way you want them to? All right, there we go. What do we think the future of movie going is going to look like? So with HBO Max dropping this huge, massive announcement last week, 17 films coming out, like they're in, all of Warner Brothers 2021 slate dropping on HBO Max the same day that it's also being released in theaters. One movie every 3 weeks. Think about that. One movie every 3 weeks coming out in theaters and on HBO Max the same day. Crazy, unprecedented. The question now becomes, is this the final nail in the coffin for movie theaters? A lot of people have said, even I, myself, on this show, I have talked about how this is the death of movie theaters. Not that movie theaters will ever completely go away. I think I've been pretty vocal and clear on this point. But the landscape moving forward will not look the same as it does. Well, I mean, as it did in 2019. As it does today, everything's crazy and up in the air right now. But things moving forward will probably not look the same as they did a year ago or 2 years ago, or how we've known them to be, right? There's a lot of opinion articles out there. There's a lot of people, posting this fact and that fact and whatever. And I would kind of like to address a lot of this stuff for a moment, because even I like to jump the gun a little bit, and you hear a headline and, oh, this is the death of movie theaters, and I get it. I'm guilty of it. We jump on these massive headlines and we say, oh, this is the death of movie theaters, and oh, nothing's going to look the same. I read an opinion piece in the New York Times. Here, let me pull it up real quick. So there was an opinion piece in the New York Times where they kind of go through and interview a bunch of people, and like Ava DuVernay, J.J. Abrams, and they even referenced David O. Selznick. David O. Selznick, if you're not familiar, he was the one who directed. I think he helped to adapt the screenplay, but he directed Gone with the Wind, amongst many other movies. So the article starts off from the New York Times, from David O. Selznick, with a quote of when television was first introduced into people's homes, when it really started becoming a thing. David O. Selznick said, "This is the death of cinema. Our industry has only been around for about 50 years, a little bit more than 50 years, barely. And television was the death of cinema." Then it goes into the comparisons of, the pandemic from that ended in 1918, about 100 years ago, the Spanish flu, and I think it was J.J. Abrams who brought this to everyone's attention in this particular article, which is to say, there's a reason it's called the Roaring Twenties. The Roaring Twenties happened right after the Spanish flu pandemic, and everybody was out spending money. Everybody wanted to be out partying and socializing and enjoying life and kind of celebrating the fact that we can do this again. We can go out of our homes and do this again. So, and it's not just J.J. Abrams, but I've heard this opinion from a lot of other people as well, right? The whole Roaring Twenties followed directly the pandemic from 1918. Ava DuVernay goes on to, spout her theories and everything. And I want to focus on J.J. Abrams for a second, though, because he said some really interesting things in comparing television to cinema. Here, let me jump into the article really quick. Forgive me. This particular article, if you have a chance to read it, I highly encourage that, because there's so much. There's so much in here that is very, very fascinating. And it really kind of makes you think about a lot of things. J.J. Abrams. He's talking about the relationship between oh man, this is so unprofessional of me. Sorry, everybody. Um, it's coming. Oh, promise me it's coming. Um, okay, here we go. Top of this article. Mr. Abrams, as much a television wunderkind as a movie one, described the difference between small screens and big ones by summarizing something he'd heard once on National Public Radio on NPR. Television, he explained, is the child and the audience is the parent. It's smaller than you. You can control it by changing the channel. But with movies, the roles are reversed. You are the small one. You're supposed to look up at them. And I thought that was a really fascinating way of looking at this. Is that, when you're in a movie theater, you're physically looking up at this giant screen. When you're at home, you're physically looking down. I mean, historically, television screens are much bigger now than they ever used to be. But historically, you would look down at your television screen. I mean, we look down at our phones, we look down at our computers, and it may be still, depending on your home theater setup, you may still be looking down at your television set. So it's an interesting dynamic to say that you can control what's on television, because if you don't like it, you just change the channel. But you can't control that in a movie theater. You already bought your ticket. You're in the theater. You're with a couple hundred other people surrounding you, if it's not a pandemic, and you're looking up at this thing that's bigger than you. Lloydie kind of touched on this in our last segment about Disney in the relationship between like you and the film, and it's the concept that certain film actors don't want to, or historically back in the day, wouldn't want to go down to television to kind of reduce themselves a little bit, because you're looking up at them as opposed to looking down. All of this is to say, I think we are jumping to conclusions far too quickly. I think we are reading big headlines. I think we want to be as dramatic as possible. And again, I'm guilty of it. I have done this. I have looked at the headlines, and yes, I've read the articles, but I've also kind of like done my not due diligence and just spouting off some of this stuff. And I think it's still maybe a little too early to call what the future is going to look like. Because as Lloydie has pointed out, as other guests have pointed out, as I myself have pointed out, we are social creatures. We don't want to not be social creatures. We want to have things to go out and do. And if history's taught us anything, it's that in times of trouble, the night is darkest just before the dawn. And when the dawn comes, we all stand up and rejoice. I've kind of, Lloydie, I've kind of thrown my 2 cents into the proverbial ring for a moment. Where do you stand on this? Do you think that movie theaters are going to go away completely? Do you think the landscape is going to change? What do you think that's going to look like? Do you think we're being a little too dramatic in this regard? Where do you stand?
Oh, I don't mind a little bit of drama, you know me, but the thing is, when anyone ever says about a medium, yeah, that medium is dead, I am always immediately skeptical. Like, I've worked for 25 years predominantly in the radio industry, and decades and decades and decades before I was born, people were saying radio was dead. I've had a 25-year career out of it, on and off, and it's still going. And during the pandemic, radio listening has increased. It's been more valued by people than it was previously. So I think, prediction is a fool's game. I think you can only look at evidence and go, I think projection is better than prediction. You can kind of make your own little projection and say, that's roughly where it's going to be, I think, and then you can be proved right or wrong. I personally think movie theaters are long term going to be just fine, providing they reinvent themselves. I mean, I remember I know it's hard to believe looking at my face, but I was alive in the 1980s, and I remember back then in the 1980s they were kind of predicting the end for cinema. They were saying, movies aren't selling. We've got movie theaters closing, and then the multiplex was invented. And it, again, like earlier on, I said it's about experiences. Like if you are giving people an experience that is greater than just the movie, although the movie is obviously the pinnacle, then that is where I am absolutely certain the future is, because more than ever before as humans, I think, we really crave connection and experiences because we spend so much time on our devices, on our smartphones, and the pandemic has only increased that. And those moments of connection, we're craving more and more. And to have a collective experience, whether it's in a movie theater or a real theater, I say real theater, but you know what I mean,
Right,
a live theater environment, those are magical times. And like I go back to the Decoder podcast that I was speaking about earlier on. They were the business of Alamo Drafthouse would be fine because they were investing in all the elements of the experience. Like, I've never been to a movie theater where they're selling like locally brewed craft beer, for example, where I can pick from my, local ones, or, where the coffee's from a local roastery, things like that. It's about the whole thing. And then when you sit there in that comfy seat, and like you said, you've got that huge screen, like even people with a home cinema set do not have what a decently kitted out movie theater has. Unless you're a millionaire, that just ain't happening for most people. So you really do get an experience, and you hear the moment when people gasp around you. When you're watching a comedy, it is demonstrably funnier when there are people around you laughing.
Well, that's kind of one of the things.
We know that people find that
If
funny.
I can interject for a second, that's kind of one of the things that we addressed on the show yesterday. Is a comment was thrown in from a longtime watcher of the show from Leeds, and he was saying that, like, do American audiences really jump and cheer at the movies because English audiences are more subdued and calmer and more polite in that regard? And I think that speaks to the kind nature of the standard Brit. But in America, yeah, like one of the things that we talked about was, do you remember in Avengers Endgame? And again, like we hashed this all out yesterday, but that moment in Avengers Endgame, spoiler alert, when Thanos was raging towards the end, it was gearing up towards the final battle. He'd knocked out Iron Man already. He subdued Captain America, and then he kicked the crap out of Thor. And then he's just standing there, and you're thinking, like, he just took out the main three guys. Like, what is happening? And then Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, is covered in lightning. It starts to levitate just a little bit, and you're like, hang on a second, something's happening. And then it rushes across the screen. And then who catches it? Captain America. And the entire movie theater, I was in Florida. I was in Orlando, Florida, watching this. The entire theater erupted with roars and applause and cheers, and people were literally standing. People were on their feet, and we're sitting in the lie flat seats in like the recliners. People reset the recliners just so they could stand and applaud at this moment. It was a moment that nobody could have predicted. And as our guest on the show yesterday pointed out, Roland Lopez, if we had not been able to see that movie in theaters and you had to watch it by yourself at home, you would have been robbed of that experience. You would have been completely robbed of that experience.
And don't get me wrong, we do have, moments in the theater where we react. You mentioned our kindly nature. I think it's basically because British people are deeply repressed emotionally. And actually, to be fair, in more recent years, we've loosened up a little bit as a country. Certainly, I remember watching the Jordan Peele movie, Get Out. And I witnessed an entire movie theater jump, including my friend Liam next to me, who literally jumped higher than I've ever seen anyone jump out of a seat in my life. So it does happen. But I mean, Captain America catching a hammer is not going to have us whooping and cheering, not least because it's Captain America, not Captain Britain.
When Captain Britain comes to the screen, and I predict he will be coming sooner rather than later.
Played by Hugh Grant.
Hopefully not. Oh my dear heavens, no, thank you. Oh no, thank you. Henry Golding, maybe. I would love to see Henry Golding make an MCU appearance. I think that would be wonderful. I think he's a lovely human being. Anyway, guys, question for you is, what are your thoughts on the changing landscape? I mean, HBO Max and Warner Media has really switched things up a lot. We're still waiting to hear announcements from the Disney company later today, maybe tomorrow. We know major things are happening, things that are changing the here and the now. But what do you think the future looks like? Do you think movie theaters will endure? Do you think that all the movie theaters will shut down completely, or do you think they will shut down completely and then have a resurgence? Like, there's so many question marks in the air hanging right now. What do you think? Jump on down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you like this video, click like. If you really like this video, click subscribe. And if you really, really like this video, click share. Because that is exactly what Scrooge McDuck would want you to do. DuckTales, woo!